So today is our last lecture of class, so I thought it fairly appropriate to talk about App Store publishing. A lot of what you guys are building is really exciting, actually. I've seen a lot of really great applications coming out of the class this semester. So I want to tell you about how you can get those on the store. And I encourage all of you to pay attention to this and try to get something out there. Publishing is, as a technical process, has gotten a lot easier over the years, and actually having software out on a real store that people care about is pretty incredible. It's fun to see people that you don't know actually utilizing your stuff. So I really, really encourage you to put something together and package it well enough that you can put it on the store. Even if you're just going to have it out there such that you can use it as an example of the work that you do. Definitely get it out. So, first of all, you need to make sure you're part of the Apple Developer Program. You probably already are because it's free now. If you're not, go to developer.apple.com/programs. Actually sign up as a developer. You have to have an Apple ID. And once you've done that, you can start deploying to real devices, and you'll utilize that same account in order to do your publishing. When I first did this, I did it on a sheet of paper at WWDC. So I don't really know the process from start to finish myself. I think I'll have a good time with it, though. It's a whole lot easier than it used to be. In order to enroll, you choose whether or not you're enrolling as an individual or as an organization. This is something that's going to stay associated with that particular account. So it's something to pay attention to. But really, pretty much everyone at this point just enrolls as an individual because enrolling as an organization is kind of a pain. So unless you're actually a company that has been around for several years, enroll as an individual, and then you'll be able to get things out much more quickly. When you actually log in, you'll see something like this. This is an interface that is a little bit old, but it's still pretty true to form. The developer portal that they have here allows you to work with your actual account. Who's involved. Even though you've enrolled as an individual, it doesn't mean that you don't have an organization. You can actually be part of several organizations. And people can be part of your organization that you're putting together applications for. So you have membership, people that are part of that, certificates that you manage, provisioning profiles, identifiers, and iTunes Connect, which is what is actually used for distribution of applications. iTunes Connect is the same interface that's used by music and movie publishers in order to put things on iTunes. So that's the kind of whole portal for that. So this is the developer console, but iTunes Connect has its own thing that you can log into independently. And a bunch of other stuff that's involved here. But the main things are people, certificates, and the iTunes Connect interface. So we talked about signing certificates last time. Signing certificates are part of a public-private key pair. The private certificate is on your own development machine. The public certificate gets shared with Apple and is used to validate the software that you send to them, as well as to decrypt the information that is sent to every individual user's phone whenever they download your application package. The provisioning profile says what devices your application can be installed on. For distribution, you should be able to have a distribution provisioning profile that allows anyone to utilize your application. If you're building for enterprise, you can sign with an enterprise provisioning profile that just allows it for the devices that are registered with that enterprise, or there are development provisioning profiles that are limited to 200 devices. So that's kind of how that all works. So make sure that you don't lose your private key for your signing certificate. You will have to revoke the certificate and get a new one if you lose your private key. It's not that big a deal because Apple will have the public key and they can still use your existing binary. But it's good to have that key around to maintain some consistency. Your provisioning profiles, depending on what kind of profile they are, they have an expiration. Once those provisioning profiles expire, it's kind of up to Apple as to whether or not the software can continue to be installed. The provisioning profile is paired with a bundle identifier. The bundle identifier is made from the name of your application when you build it, and that bundle identifier then becomes the unique name for the app. So when you supply updates to your application, it will still attach to that same bundle identifier. You can change everything about how that's presented to the user, but the bundle identifier itself remains the same. In fact, I have a bundle identifier for one of our products that definitely does not have the same name as the official name for the application, because Apple sent me a cease and desist about the name. They were unhappy about it. It was called Mobile Finder, which they objected to the Finder word. So whatever. When we actually code sign, you do your development on your application, you code sign it, it becomes an encrypted application that can then be deployed to devices. Remember to hold on to that private key. The device itself does not get the private key. This is the iTunes Connect interface. So this is the interface that for developers that is used in order to keep track of applications. Notice there's not anything about music and stuff on here because they attach that to the particular ID when doing the uploads. So you have a section for all of the applications that you have created marketing material for. So this is where you come up with the marketing material for your app. It's description, icons, all those kinds of things. You also have access into analytics, sales and trends, as well as payments if you happen to be selling your software rather than offering it for free. They probably don't have the icon for iAd anymore. I'd have to log in and find out. That's kind of a thing that Apple doesn't do as much anymore. But there's also users and roles agreements and other links here. All of the agreements that you sign with Apple as a developer are kept in this portal such that you have them on file. And if you're going to be receiving payments for your applications, there are some additional agreements that you sign in order for Apple to be able to sell things on your behalf in like 100 different nations and charge tax on your behalf. So those are very, very helpful agreements. Generally work pretty well. That's basically what says that you get 70% and Apple gets 30%. So that's what those are for. So this is essentially what's available. Apple tends to add to iTunes Connect features from time to time. Sales and trends and analytics were not available when the service first came out. But it's really nice to be able to know how much you're selling as well as know how many people are actually using your application. The analytics that Apple offers are somewhat limited. If you need to get more detailed information about who's using your application over time, look into something like Fabric. That does a pretty good job, also for crash reporting. When you click on My Apps, you'll get something like this. They've changed the interface a little bit, but here's a bunch of applications that we had on the store. We're offering at one point, and it's kind of in a random order. I don't quite know how they choose to filter the list. And this is any application for which you have created marketing material. So the process is you say, I want to add a new app by clicking on the button up at the top left, and it will ask you, okay, what's your app called? That's the first thing it asks. You say whether it's for iOS, tvOS, they're probably going to offer a few more in that listing now. The primary language of the application, this is the spoken language, not the programming language, as well as the bundle identifier. And they give you an option for a SKU. I tend to just put a GID in there, a globally unique identifier, but you can put in whatever you want for the SKU. And that identifies your app. It doesn't have anything to do with the code. And you start adding information to this application definition. If the name has already been taken, you'll be told at this point. I believe that if you do not get the application on the store in the whereabouts of 90 days from this point, Apple will reclaim the name and stop reserving it for you. That was policy from a little while ago, though, so that may have changed. But that's essentially how this works. If you want to know whether or not a name is available, you have to sign up for one. So once you've created that application definition, you then start putting in information about the application. The name will be populated, of course, and so will the bundle identifier and SKU. But you can do things like set the application's category, put in a privacy policy for how you use any of the user's information, as well as talk about pricing and availability. One of the things that you add here is screenshots for your application. You're required to provide screenshots for your application such that it can be posted on the store. You are essentially given 5 slots in order to put application screenshots, and you're encouraged to offer screenshots from multiple different device types. Apple changes from time to time which ones they actually require. I think at this point, if you say that you are iPad compatible, you must supply at least one set of iPad screenshots, and you need to supply screenshots for a specific phone size, which I believe is iPhone 5. And and then they do scaling for other applications or for other devices. The reason why they do this is because they want to offer a tailored experience for each device. So you're encouraged to offer screenshots for every single device. So this can be 40, 50 images, and they do take some time to put together. So make sure you take that time. Best way to do it is to take screenshots from an actual running physical device, but you can also do it from the simulator and mark it all up in Photoshop and all that kind of stuff if you want. There are a bunch of helps at this point that tell you how to make screenshots and what sizings and all those kinds of things, so I'm not going to go over that. The site will essentially guide you. But don't use JPEGs. They will not like them. Use something that is lossless, particularly PNG is the file type to use. In fact, you should use PNG for everything except for photos, because it's the best. Another thing you have to come up with is a description. You have a text description of your application. You have to say what it does and how it works, and you're doing some sales here. People do judge books by their cover. They're going to read the description of your application, and they're going to look at your icon to determine whether or not it's something that they're interested in. And usually you only get them for like the first sentence or so if they read the description at all. So make sure that your application title and icon really say what your application does and are high quality. If you're going to put time and money into marketing, those are the two biggest things to pay attention to. You can change the icon and the description for an application at any time. You don't have to make an update to the application to make those changes. There are a few pieces that you do only have the opportunity to change when you make application updates. Keywords is one of those. Keywords are used for searches. Apple pays attention to your description, pays attention to your application name, and pays attention to the keywords when the user does searching. If I had some magic for how to have your application best to be found on the App Store, I wouldn't tell you anyway because I'd be a multimillionaire. So come up with your keywords whatever way you think is best. That's pretty much what I've got for you in terms of how to fill in the information here. But produce something, and be aware that it takes some time. Creating screenshots, creating description, creating icons is probably the piece of publishing that takes the most time. The pieces of publishing, if you already actually have a compiled executable. So think about that stuff. You do not have to provide a marketing URL. I believe a support URL is required for your application. So some website that talks about the app specifically, and hopefully also who you are, and it's linked from the App Store, such that you can learn more about the developer. That's the URL that they will use. So websites are really easy to put together, really easy to host. If you really wanted to, you could probably do something from the university. I don't know if that's a good idea, but they're super cheap. So don't worry too much about being able to come up with a website for your app. You should have something. It's really easy just to throw a WordPress installation somewhere and choose a template that looks nice for your app. So I'd encourage you to do that as well. Once you filled all that stuff in, they'll also want some information about your application. They'll ask you to put in a first name and last name, address, phone number, and email for an actual person that can be contacted about the app. Put in real information here. Apple may actually want to contact you and say, hey, we want to highlight your application if you're lucky. And they'll ask you more about things like the rating for your application. This file browser happened to be a rating of 17 plus at the time because it had access to the evil internets. And it was required that I let everyone know that it had the ability to talk to the internet. At this point, Apple has gotten a little smarter about that. So their ratings make more sense. Also uses version numbers. I encourage a major minor patch version number, number. If you like to just use a date, you can do that too. Be aware that your version numbers need to somehow increase, and they have an arbitrary algorithm for determining whether or not your version number is increasing. If you decrease the version number, it will say, it can't be that version number, it's lower than the last one. So major minor patch is a pretty good way to go. The default, I believe, for the templates at this point is just major minor. Choose something there. You can put in copyright information. That's as easy as saying what year and by who. If you want to get into the legalese of copyrights, I encourage you to go talk to professors here at the university. They will tell you lots more about it than I will. There's even a class about it here. Additional information you need to put in. If you support things like Game Center or notifications or in-app purchases, any of that kind of stuff, you have to put in additional information. If you just have a binary you're putting up there and you're selling it for 99 cents, it's actually pretty straightforward. If you're not selling it for 99 cents, it's even more straightforward. And they try to split the roles up such that you could be a really large organization and have a particular person who is involved with media access, or a person who's involved with finances, or someone who's actually a technical contact. So they split all that up. Just put yourself in as all of them. Not too bad. Once you've actually done that, you have a definition for an application that you can then upload. It used to be that you had to use Xcode to do this. I actually don't have a slide for it because it changes. Or sorry, that you had to have another application do this. Now you do it right from Xcode. So in Xcode, once you've created this application definition, you can say this app binary matches with this definition. It's one of the build profiles for iOS. You build for distribution. So just like you can build for release and you can build for debug, you can also build for distribution. And it packages your application together, does signing, and there's even a very nice set of tools that walks you through kind of a pre-conformance to make sure that your application has everything that it needs. Like it has an application icon. The bundle identifier is valid. You have some kind of way for doing the default image for when your application actually loads, either as a storyboard or as a properly sized default image. They go over tons of stuff like that and make sure that your application in any automated way can be pre-validated. And that's all baked into Xcode. It used to be part of an application called Application Loader. Now it's just part of Xcode. So go through that process, follow whatever Apple tells you to do with that. It's really dependent on your application and what you're doing in your application in terms of what they will require you to do. But make sure you've got an icon. And you've got that icon in several different sizes and formats. That's going to be the number one thing they'll be nitpicky about. You go through all this process to write an application and to create a description for it on the store. You should be creating backups of your application. In particular, in my opinion, you should be using a source code management system. Something like Git. In fact, specifically Git, because Git is great. What Git does is it allows you to version your code as you go, and you should have some way of tagging what you actually gave Apple. Because when someone says that there's a bug in your code, and you've actually been working on the code in the meantime, you need to be able to roll back to exactly the code that was submitted such that you can find out why there was a problem with your code. So set up some system in Git in order to be able to roll back to that version so you can examine what's going on and be able to push up fixes. That's why major, minor, and patch is helpful. You can create a hot fix for a particular code base. Even if you're working on version 1.1, you can go back to 1.0.0 and add a patch for 1.0.1 to fix some problem that someone encounters. The popular way to do that I've seen on Git is to have 3 different repositories. The master repository, the dev repository, and the test repository. So master is what's on the store. That's the top of master is the current version. Dev is where you work on things. And test is the version that the testing team in the organization is using in order to test. Even if you are a very small team, those 3 divisions are really helpful. And in master, you can actually add tags for this is version 1.0.0, this is version 1.0.1, and so on. You'll be able to get back to that exact code whenever you need to. So use a source code management system. That's the best way to do it. Make sure that that code is being stored elsewhere. Don't just run the repository on your local machine. Use GitHub, or use something better like GitLab, which is also awesome. And host it on a machine that is not in the same place as where your development machine is. Fires do happen. My house burned down in 2009. So have your stuff somewhere else. Your laptops get stolen. Things get corrupted. You need to have a backup, and it needs to be physically separate from you and your development machine. Because you're putting time and effort into this. People are paying money for it. It is something that is valuable. It's as important to protect as your car and your personal possessions. So make backups. It's worth it. You can buy a backup machine from Apple as well for a third backup. It's like, why would I want to do that? 2 backups is pretty good. Well, the reason why I definitely always use a third backup is because you want something that is versioned between your commits in Git. The time capsule will look at changes to files on your drive every hour. So if you accidentally kill code and can't go find it again, you can at least go back to where you were an hour ago. That's not so bad as losing things. We have had probably a $10,000 worth code base just disappear into the ether, and it was gone forever. Don't let that happen to you. Learn from our mistakes. Make a backup. It's like, what, $300? So it's a good thing to have. I used to save zip files of every single named revision. Now I just use Git. Git's better anyway. So I've talked about what information you need to pull together in order to build your application from a technical perspective all through class. Talked about a little bit about the marketing kind of header information that is what people use in order to determine whether or not they want your application. Talked about backups. The number one thing that I want to talk about today, though, is just go for it. If any of this stuff is a barrier to you getting started with actually submitting applications to the App Store, forget it. Forget the backups, forget good policy, forget making a nice icon, make your description ASDF. I don't care. Get software on the store. It's a wonderfully good experience, and you can make things better as you go. So these are all suggestions that we've found useful. But the number one thing is get things done. If you happen to have the opportunity, form a limited liability company in the state of Utah and do this with a partner. Find somebody that you know and trust and like, and work on applications together. When you've got more than one person working on a project, you get to kind of key off of one another's fire capability. Sometimes you are completely slammed with things in life, but they're going to be doing a little bit better and they can push things forward. If you work with other people as you're doing your development effort, you will be much more likely to succeed. Make sure it's someone that you know and that you trust and that you work well with, though, because you don't want to get into situations where you feel like you're kind of dragging them along either. So it's a good thing. LLCs are a great way to build a company here in Utah because they're fairly easy to create. You go to corporations.utah.gov, and that's where you can create an LLC. You fill out a web form for them, and they generate all of the legal documents that you need from that web form. They create an articles of organization. You can pay the fee to actually be a corporation in Utah. It's about $50. You can create a company in an afternoon. It's not hard. Again, if there's a barrier to you, forget about it. In the United States, if you just start selling crap on the side of the road, you are a business. It's referred to as a sole proprietorship, and it's indistinguishable from you as an individual from a tax perspective. So you can just sign up with Apple, say you're you, start selling your stuff. Done. Don't have to create a business or anything. And as long as you're not making like military drone software, you don't have to worry about liability either. It's just a piece of software. So just get out there, sell stuff. You really can take what's on your laptop right now, start trying to build it for distribution, fix any of the issues that they have, and attach it to marketing information and get it up on the store. It's not going to be something that takes 20 minutes. It will take you some time to actually get it done, but I highly suggest it. It's been a really good thing for me in my own life. I've seen it be really good for a lot of other students. I've seen several students start their own companies right out of this class, successful companies that still work today. I've seen many students that have gotten amazing job offers because of the final projects that they had and the ability for someone to just go ahead and download that project from the App Store to be able to evaluate their abilities. It's a portfolio piece. The people on the art side of campus understand this very, very, very well. Make a bunch of pieces of good stuff, because that says more about your capabilities than a degree or a grade or any of that. If you can show someone, I made this, it's awesome, huh? I mean, there's your resume. That's what people are really going to look at, and that's the thing that's going to distinguish you. So get it on the store. It's just a distribution mechanism. You don't have to sell stuff on it. Makes it really easy for people to use. You don't have to worry about ad hoc distribution or provisioning profiles or blah, 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 blah. If somebody says, hey, what's some stuff that you've done? You just send them a link that takes them directly to the App Store. Done. In fact, I would suggest you put that link on a paper resume that you put in, because more than likely people are going to read it as a PDF anyway. So that's kind of what I had for you today. I am extremely open and happy to answer questions about how to get applications on the store. I'm even happy to answer questions about how to get businesses started, situations that you run into in terms of how to construct a business, how do you work effectively with other people. I can tell you about things you'll run into in terms of taxes, but I am not a tax accountant. I am also not a lawyer. These are very large disclaimers. But I can tell you what I know. And I'm always happy to share that information with you. Send me email. I'm happy to respond to it. I've actually had previous students, even this semester, contact me and say, hey, I've got this new thing going on. I just wanted to talk to you about strategy. And we go to lunch. So that's something that I want to offer to you guys. I'm an entrepreneur. I love just getting out there and doing things. I love being an engineer. I love solving problems. And business is just a vehicle for doing that. And I'm happy to share what information I can about how to make you successful in doing the same. I don't have a demo today. I wish I could demo starting a business. That's difficult. I actually have an application that I need to submit to the store. And I thought about actually doing that as a demo for you guys. I just couldn't figure out a way to make it actually work out. It's not a opaque process anymore. Apple has really improved the tools for getting apps up on the store. And you should be able to essentially utilize their tools built into Xcode and just questions online about the process and be able to get things up there pretty well. But it really does boil down to icons, screenshots, description on iTunes, and putting all that stuff into a marketing package that you attach a binary to. And that's your process. I wanted to give time to help you guys out with your final projects today. Please ask me questions. I will be available as much as I can be by appointment as we approach the due date. I'm a working professional as well, so email is usually easiest for me. Sam will be probably even more available than I will be. So make sure you send questions to him first if it's something that he can answer for you. Help us know how we can make you successful. This final project is a large part of your grade, and we want to see you successful. So let's get there.